Good morning, everyone. A Brazilian champion martial artist once said, probably wondering where I'm going, "Anger brought me to jiu-jitsu, but love made me stay." I imagine that many of us gathered here today vividly recall the anger we felt when the United States, unprovoked, was attacked on the morning of September the 11th of 2001. We responded to the violence and injustice of the attacks by seeking solace in our families and our friends. We soon realized, however, that anger alone wouldn't create solutions or safeguard air transportation. So we quickly opened the aperture beyond our own pain and loss to reach out and help others. We wanted to ensure that our industry did everything possible to make certain that no such attack would ever happen again. Indeed, ALPA's aviation security work is a labor of love. It's the love we hold for family members, friends, and colleagues who fell that September day 18 years ago. And our work is also a reflection of the love we have for aviation as our profession. Now, it's an honor for me to be here and welcome you today. Our event includes our staff, our colleagues from across the airline industry, our neighbors from Vallow Park, and ALPA pilots, some of whom are here this week to conduct our union's work as part of our executive council. A special note, we're also pleased that Captain Randy Babbitt is here with us today, as always, sir, past ALPA president and former FAA administrator, as well as representatives from the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, who are also here with us today. Now, earlier this summer, the mementos contained in our Remembrance Garden were painstakingly transported to ALPA's new home here in Vallow. In Tyson's, just as it did in Herndon, the garden captures an enduring spirit of recollection, but also our sense of deep commitment to the safety and the security of our skies. The garden surrounding us contains a 10-ton center stone from a quarry in western Pennsylvania. It's split to represent the terrible fractures that 9/11 attacks created in families, in friendships, and in our communities. The two sentry stones at the entrance came from a quarry just a few miles from the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where United Airlines 93 went down. This garden also includes a portion of the outer wall of the Pentagon and two sections of steel I-beams from the World Trade Center site. Originally dedicated on September the 11th of 2006, the 5th anniversary of the attacks, ALPA's Remembrance Garden continues to create a place of unity today. And we know that the success of our work depends on our unity. Delivering on our commitment to aviation security will only be possible through the collective strength of airline pilots working together and speaking with one true voice. Every day, more than 63,000 ALPA members and staff work right by our side. We work together with others across the industry to advance safety and security for our passengers, cargo, crews, and our communities. One recent example is ALPA's response to recently proposed changes that would have weakened the security of known crew member programs. ALPA and other stakeholders worked together to develop improvements that strengthened the KCM program, addressed security concerns, and ultimately received the approval of the TSA. That was ALPA's actions that did that. This successful outcome demonstrates the tremendous power of collaboration across our union and our industry. In other aviation security work, we were successful in obtaining a congressional requirement for the FAA to issue a rule by October the 5th of 2019 mandating the installation of secondary flight deck barriers on all newly manufactured passenger aircraft. If you know the issue, you know why I stress that point. Congress was crystal clear about the intent of the language and crystal clear about the deadline. ALPA pilots will marshal every necessary resource to put these proven, cost-effective security assets in place. And ALPA is very optimistic that a robust aviation security bill will be introduced in the U.S. House this fall. We're calling for legislation to contain a requirement for a secure, reinforced door for all cargo airliners. Believe it or not, that still does not exist today. We're also pressing for the bill to expand the ASEP voluntary safety reporting program to the security arena. Our anger at the 9/11 attacks may have brought us to aviation security, or it may have spurred us to do more association work. But regardless, for ALPA pilots, we are here to stay. So it was about this time, 18 years ago, at 8:46 a.m., that hijackers flew American Airlines Flight 11 into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City, my home. Terrorists flying United Airlines Flight 175 hit the South Tower 17 minutes later. At 9:37 a.m., hijackers flying American Airlines Flight 77 struck the Pentagon in Arlington County, Virginia. And at 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashed into a field near Shanksville. We witnessed the senseless deaths of not only the passengers and crew members on board, but of the courageous first responders and those victims who were simply going about living their daily lives. Mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, husbands and wives and loved ones died that day, but their legacy invites us to take meaning from that day. Now, at this time, I'd like to invite ALPA United Master Executive Counsel, Captain Todd INSLER, to share his perspective. Todd, if you please step forward.
Good morning. Each year, on September 11, our nation takes time to remember. Our 9/11 ceremonies are not simply tributes to the past. These ceremonies give us the opportunity for retrospection and introspection. They help us to honor the memory of those we lost on that horrific day, and those who survived and carried on after the attacks on our country and our way of life. On September 11, 2001, we saw people choose duty in the face of fear, as crew members and passengers fought back against evil. We saw humanity at its finest, as first responders ran towards the flames and into the crumbling buildings to save lives. We saw strangers helping strangers in the small Canadian town of Gander, Newfoundland, where they fed, nurtured, and cared for nearly 7,000 people after 38 aircraft diverted to their island when the National Airspace System shut down. We also saw courage in our own ranks, as fellow pilots and flight attendants managed through the darkness and went back to work, restoring faith and confidence in the shaken air transportation system that provides strength, prosperity, and well-being to our nation. Over the last 18 years, we have seen many improvements in security. However, a great deal of work remains to ensure all cockpits and aircraft are secure from future acts of terror. We must ensure Congress mandates the installation of secondary barriers on all commercial aircraft. It is crucial we continue to advocate for one level of safety and security. Today, as we think back on the events of 9/11 with sorrow over the loss of so many, We find comfort in the example shown by those who have persevered. Those who endeavor every day to continue working together, managing through the obstacles in an effort to make our world a better place. Many of the witnesses to 9/11 have passed since that fateful day nearly 20 years ago. The children like my own, who were newborns, are now young adults. As we distance ourselves in time from the events of that day, future generations must always be taught that it is imperative that we always remember, that we learn from history, and that we never repeat it. As time goes on, we grow, we get stronger, and we heal, and we must never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain INSLER. Please let me ask Captain Tim Perry, ALPA Canada President, to relate his thoughts for us today. Tim?
Morning. On this day, we are reminded that the world is not without evil. While there is great darkness, there is also the unmistakable light of goodness in people who share the values of peace and freedom. And these values do and must unite us. These values span borders, and in particular, our border. As pilots, we felt this attack uniquely, and we will never forget. But this terrible act failed to divide us, and as Canadians, as Americans, as pilots in our noble profession, we stood together then, as we stand together now, and as we will stand together forever. Let us be grateful for the life we have the opportunity to live and share with those we love. As with so many things in life, it is our unity that gives us strength. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Jody Crisais from ALPA's Communications Department to lead us in singing Amazing Grace. Jody?
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious is that grace appeared the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home.
Thank you, Jody. At this time, I'd like to ask Ron RINDFLEISCH from ALPA's Representation Department to share with us a few words of reflection. Ron?
Good morning and happy Patriot Day. Before I get into my remarks, I thought for a second, hearing the sound of the construction in the distance, that's a good sound. That's a really good sound. As we gather in this solemn remembrance garden, please take a moment to ask yourself the same question we ask each other every year. Where were you on 9/11? With every year that passes, our memories of that day may fade a little, but we must never forget the feelings we all felt and remind everyone, including future generations, how the world changed. We should share with them the horror and shock we experienced that day when airplanes flew into buildings and people perished. We should remember our fear and anger, our confusion and sense of threat. I'll never forget the look on my wife's face as she looked at me with a scared and puzzled face and asked, why? But we should also remember how we looked with honor on acts of courage by ordinary people who sacrificed themselves to prevent further death and destruction, and the great hospitality and goodwill shown by our friends in Canada. We all know hatred was the main reason we had to suffer that day, but it's our love and respect for each other that has made us all stronger. We all had something taken from us that day on 9/11, and there was one expression that was missing on that horrific day, and that was the joy of laughter. So let's take a moment to show the love and respect we have for each other by turning to those next to you and offer a smile, a handshake, or a hug. Let me share a short prayer with you. God, we call to you this day when the memories of 9/11 weigh so heavily upon our hearts. Help us with our fear and our anger, our confusion and sense of threat. Remember to honor the flight crews and all those we lost that day in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. And continue to watch over all the flight crews who take to the skies every day. Help us to continue to work for a world free from every form of hatred, violence, and ignorance, and may terrorism, in all its forms, disappear from the face of the earth. Amen. We must never forget what happened on that dreadful day 18 years ago, but we must believe that good always wins over evil, and we must remember to love all the people God sent you. One day, God will take them back. So I'll leave you with 3 things to do today. Encourage each other, believe in each other, and smile at each other.
Thank you, Ron. I'd now like to ask Captain Bob Fox, ALPA's first Vice President, to please take a step forward for us to help us honor the crew members and the employees who were lost in the attacks. We will never forget United Airlines Flight 93, Captain Jason Dahl, First Officer Leroy Homer Jr., Flight Attendant Lorraine Bay, Flight Attendant Sandra Bradshaw, Flight Attendant Wanda Green, Flight Attendant C.C. Lyles, Flight Attendant Deborah Welsh, United Airlines Flight 175, Captain Victor Saraceni, First Officer Michael Horrocks, Flight Attendant Robert Fangman, Flight Attendant Amy Jarrett, Flight Attendant Amy King. Flight Attendant Catherine Labori. Flight Attendant Alfred Marchand. Flight Attendant Michael Tureau. Flight Attendant Alicia Titus. Customer Service Representative Marianne McFarland. Customer Service Representative Jesus Sanchez. American Airlines, Flight 11, Captain John Aganowski. First Officer Thomas McGinnis. Flight Attendant Barbara Arestagui. Flight Attendant Jeffrey Coleman. Flight Attendant Sarah Lowe. Flight Attendant Karen Martin. Flight Attendant Kathleen Nicosia. Flight Attendant Betty Ong. Flight Attendant Jean Roger. Flight Attendant Diane Snyder. Flight Attendant Madeline Sweeney. American Airlines Flight 77, Captain Charles Burlingame. First Officer David Charlebois. Flight Attendant Michelle Heidenberger. Flight Attendant Jennifer Lewis. Flight Attendant Kenneth Lewis. Flight Attendant Renee May. At this time, I'd like to invite Jody Crecise to lead us in singing America the Beautiful, while Captain Bill Couette, ALPA's Vice President, Admin Secretary, and Captain Joseph Genovese, ALPA Vice President, Finance Treasurer, place a wreath before the garden stones. Jody?
Beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Thank you, Jody. Anger brought me, but love made me stay. So on behalf of the members and staff of the Airline Pilots Association International, I'd like to thank you all for joining us to honor our fallen colleagues and all those who lost their lives 18 years ago this day. And now I encourage you to take a moment to spend some time in this garden. For those of you involved in our Executive Council meeting, please make your way to your conference room at your convenience. Thank you again for being part of the ceremony today. Thank you.